I agreed to be my rival's +1 at a wedding because he begged me after his actual date bailed last minute, and I thought it would be awkward but manageable, just one night of pretending we didn't hate each other. But then everyone at the wedding started congratulating us on being such a cute couple. His family kept asking when we were getting married. And somewhere between the slow dance we were forced into and the moment he grabbed my hand under the table and didn't let go, I realized this fake couple thing was starting to feel way too real. And I had no idea how to deal with that. Before we get into this mess, drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from, and hit subscribe to help the channel grow so more stories like this can reach people who need them. My name is Lucas. I'm 26 years old, and I work as a senior marketing associate at a digital advertising agency in Austin, Texas. For the past 2 years, my biggest professional rival has been a guy named Ethan Cole. Ethan works at a competing agency across town, and somehow we always end up pitching to the same clients. I've won some, he's won some, but every time we're in the same room, there's this tension, this unspoken competition where we're both trying to prove we're better than the other. He's annoyingly good at his job. He's also annoyingly good-looking, which makes it even more irritating. Tall, athletic build, dark hair that always looks perfectly styled even when he claims he just woke up, sharp green eyes, and this confident smirk that makes me want to punch him, and also maybe stare at him for way too long. Not that I'd ever admit that out loud. We run into each other at industry events, conferences, networking happy hours. We're always professional, always polite, but there's an edge to every conversation, a challenge. He'll say something like, "Nice presentation today, Lucas, but I think you missed a key demographic insight," and I'll fire back with, "Thanks, Ethan. I'll keep that in mind next time I need advice on being condescending." It's been like this for 2 years. I figured it would always be like this. Then, 3 weeks ago, I was at a coffee shop near my office, working on a pitch deck when Ethan walked in. He saw me, did a double take, and for a second I thought he was going to turn around and leave. But instead he walked over to my table. He said, "Hey, Lucas, can I sit?" I said, "It's a free country." He sat down. He looked stressed, more stressed than I'd ever seen him. He ran a hand through his hair and said, "I need to ask you for a favor, and I know this is going to sound insane, but just hear me out." I closed my laptop. I said this should be good. He said my cousin's getting married in 2 weeks. Big wedding, like 200 people. My whole family's going to be there. I RSVP'd months ago with a +1 because I was dating someone, but we broke up last week, and now I don't have a date. My family's going to be insufferable about it. My mum's already texting me asking if I'm bringing anyone, and if I show up alone, she's going to spend the entire wedding trying to set me up with random people. I can't deal with that. I said, "Okay. So bring a friend." He said all my friends are either busy or already invited as actual guests. I've asked everyone I can think of. He paused. Then he said, "I know this is weird, but would you go with me?" I stared at him. I said, "You want me, your professional rival, the guy you've spent 2 years trying to one-up, to be your date to your cousin's wedding?" He said yes, but not as a real date. Just as a +1, someone to run interference with my family. We don't even have to pretend we're together, just 2 colleagues attending a wedding. That's it. I should have said no. I should have laughed in his face and walked away. But there was something about the way he looked at me, this desperation mixed with embarrassment, that made me pause. Also, I'll admit, I was curious. Ethan Cole, always so confident and put together, was asking me for help. That almost never happened. So I said, "Fine, but you owe me." He looked so relieved he almost smiled. He said, "Deal." "Thank you. Seriously." The wedding was on a Saturday in early October at a venue outside Austin, this gorgeous ranch with oak trees and string lights everywhere. Ethan picked me up that morning. He was wearing a dark blue suit that fit him way too well, and when I got in the car, he looked at me and said, "You clean up nice." I was wearing a charcoal gray suit, and I said, "You too." The drive was awkward. We didn't really know what to talk about outside of work. He asked about my job. I asked about his. We talked about a recent campaign we'd both seen. It was painfully polite. When we got to the venue, Ethan took a deep breath and said, "Okay, just so you know, my family's intense. Lots of questions, lots of opinions. Just smile and nod and we'll get through this." I said, "Got it." We walked in together, and immediately a woman who looked like an older version of Ethan rushed over. She said, "Ethan, you're here, and oh my God, who is this?" Ethan said, "Mom, this is Lucas. He's my +1. She looked at me like I'd just told her she won the lottery. She said, "It's so wonderful to meet you, Lucas. Ethan never brings anyone to family events. This must be serious." Ethan said, "Mom, it's not like that. We're just friends." She winked. She actually winked. She said, "Sure, honey. Well, Lucas, welcome to the family." Then she grabbed my hand, squeezed it, and walked away. I looked at Ethan. I said, "I thought you said we didn't have to pretend we were together." He said, "I didn't think she'd jump to conclusions that fast." I said, "Your mom just welcomed me to the family." He groaned. He said, "This is going to be a long day." He was right. For the next hour, as we mingled during the pre-ceremony cocktails, person after person came up to us and asked how we met, how long we'd been together if we were serious. Ethan kept trying to correct them, saying we're just colleagues, we're not dating, but no one seemed to listen. His aunt said, "Oh, you two are adorable together." His uncle said, "Ethan, you finally found someone who can keep up with you." His cousin, the groom, pulled him aside and said, "Dude, I'm so glad you brought someone. Mom was worried you'd be single forever." By the time we sat down for the ceremony, I was exhausted from smiling politely and deflecting questions. Ethan and I were seated together in the third row. The ceremony started. It was beautiful. The bride looked stunning, the groom looked nervous and happy, and when they said their vows, I felt this weird tightness in my chest. I glanced at Ethan. He was watching the couple, and there was this look on his face, something soft and vulnerable. And for a second, I forgot we were rivals. I forgot we were pretending. I just saw him. After the ceremony, we moved to the reception. Dinner was served, speeches were made, and Ethan and I sat at a table with some of his cousins and their partners. Everyone kept talking to us like we were a couple. One of his cousins said, "So how did Ethan propose the idea of coming to the wedding?" And I said, "He literally begged me at a coffee shop." Everyone laughed. Ethan kicked me under the table. I kicked him back. It was kind of fun. Then the dancing started. The bride and groom had their first dance. Then the parents joined, and then the DJ announced it was time for everyone to join in. Ethan's mum appeared out of nowhere, grabbed both of us by the arms and said, "You two need to dance." Ethan said, "Mum, we don't need to." She said, "Nonsense. Get out there." She physically pushed us toward the dance floor. We stood there in the middle of the floor, surrounded by couples swaying to some slow love song. Ethan looked at me. He said, "I'm sorry." I said, "It's fine." He held out his hand. I took it. He put his other hand on my waist, and I put mine on his shoulder. We started moving. It was stiff at first, awkward. But then Ethan said, "You're a terrible dancer." I said, "You're worse." He laughed, actually laughed, and something shifted. We kept dancing, the song kept playing, and I realized how close we were. I could smell his cologne. I could feel the warmth of his hand on my waist. I looked up, and he was already looking at me. He said, "This is weird." I said, "Yeah." He said, "But not in a bad way." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. We just kept dancing. When the song ended, we pulled apart, but Ethan didn't let go of my hand right away. We walked back to the table together, and he didn't drop my hand until we sat down. I felt like my heart was beating too fast. I told myself it was just the dancing, just the atmosphere. It didn't mean anything. But then, during dinner, Ethan's hand was on the table next to mine, and at some point, without thinking, I reached over and touched his fingers. He didn't pull away. He laced his fingers with mine, under the table, where no one could see, and we just sat there, holding hands while his family talked around us. I didn't understand what was happening. This was Ethan, my rival, the guy I'd spent 2 years competing with, but sitting there, holding his hand, I didn't feel like we were rivals. I felt like we were something else, something I couldn't name yet. After dinner, we stepped outside for some air. The sun was setting, and the sky was this gorgeous mix of orange and pink. We walked toward the edge of the property, away from the noise of the reception. Ethan said, "Thank you for doing this. I know it's been weird." I said, "It has been weird, but also kind of nice." He looked at me. He said, "Nice." I said, "Yeah, your family's intense, but they're sweet. And honestly, pretending to be your boyfriend for a day is easier than I thought it would be." He stopped walking. He said, "Pretending." I stopped too. I said, "Yeah, I mean, that's what we're doing, right?" He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "What if I don't want to pretend?" My brain short-circuited. I said, "What?" He said, "Lucas, I've spent 2 years trying to convince myself that the reason I can't stop thinking about you is because you're my competition. But that's not it. I think about you because I like you. I've liked you for a long time, and I've been too stubborn to admit it. I didn't know what to say. I just stared at him. He said, "If you don't feel the same way, that's fine. We can go back in there, finish the night, and pretend this conversation never happened, but I needed to tell you." I said, "Ethan." He said, "Yeah." I said, "I've spent 2 years trying to beat you at everything, because I thought if I could prove I was better than you, I'd stop being so stupidly attracted to you. Turns out that doesn't work." He smiled, really smiled. He said, "So we're both idiots?" I said, "Yeah, looks like it." He stepped closer. He said, "Can I kiss you?" I said, "We're at your cousin's wedding." He said, "I don't care." So I said, "Yes." He kissed me. Right there, under the oak trees, with the sound of music and laughter floating from the reception in the distance. It wasn't a fake kiss for the cameras. It wasn't for his family. It was just for us. And it felt right in a way I didn't expect. When we pulled apart, he said, "So what now?" I said, "I don't know. Maybe we stop being rivals and try being something else." He said, "Like what?" I said, "I don't know. Boyfriends." He grinned. He said, "I like the sound of that." We went back to the reception holding hands. This time, when his family asked if we were together, Ethan said yes, and I didn't correct him. The rest of the night was a blur. We danced, we ate cake, we took photos with his family. His mom pulled me aside at one point and said, "I knew the moment I saw you two together. I'm so happy for Ethan." I didn't tell her that up until a few hours ago. We'd been faking it. I just said, "Thank you." When the wedding ended, Ethan drove me home. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. When he pulled up in front of my apartment, he said, "Can I see you tomorrow?" Not for work, just to see you. I said, "Yeah, I'd like that." That was 3 months ago. We're still together. Turns out, when you stop trying to beat someone and start trying to understand them, things get a lot better. We still work for competing agencies. We still pitch to the same clients sometimes. But now, when I see him across a conference room, I don't just see my rival. I see my boyfriend, and that's a lot better. If you've ever gone to a wedding as a fake date and ended up with real feelings, drop your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one.